Go live this time around. I think we're good. So,
Cool.
Hi everyone, welcome to Quick Connect Live. The Quick Connect Live is one of the events that we do as part of the StrengthsFinder Singapore Network. So the StrengthsFinder Singapore Network is a community whereby we help everyone to discover, build on their talents, develop it into strengths, so on and so forth. So over time, Ethan and I, we decided to create something called Quick Connect, whereby we could, connect with everyone out in the world. So we started off, being quite local, but with COVID, everything went online. So we say, hey, why don't we just open up and invite everyone to join us? The more, the merrier, right? So here we are. So a very quick introduction for Ethan and myself. So my name is Alex, obviously. Oh, it's there. My top 5: empathy, individualization, developer, strategic, and learner. And I started Strengths Alchemy, and I really love developing people use and things like that. So just a little trivia, my favorite food, one of my favorite food is durians. And if you have not tried durians before, since you're not in Asia, you must come over here and you must try it. It's called the king of fruits. Some people love it, some people hate it. There's a word to describe it, right? People say that it smells like hell, but it tastes like heaven. So you got to come and try it. It's
oh God, yeah.
So maybe we can go around, right? Maybe Ethan, you can introduce yourself and then we go around the table.
Hi guys, I'm Ethan. I'm not strengths trained, so unlike all of you guys here, I'm not officially certified, but I've enjoyed having the conversations around strengths. And a little bit of background, I was just telling Marcus and Alex, repeating my story again. I was a medical student, left medical school, went into entrepreneurship, has been in multiple different hats for quite a while. Right now, I'm working on a project that deals with office politics and actually defining what it talks about, like what it is really about. Because I discovered that there's a lot of miscommunication when it comes to office politics. There's a lot of weaponization of good concepts such as strengths that people use in the office. Like, oh, because you're an ideation person, that's why you're never going to settle down, right? Like I've actually had somebody tell me that before. So yes, and I was a common friend. Right, so it can be weaponized, and so I wanted to talk about things like this that actually really created better conversations and actually better communities where people don't actually take good things and turn it into weapons against other people, but actually having great conversations over. And that's what my focus is on.
Yeah, and Ethan also does this thing called Dakota listening, whereby he's teaching people about listening skills, right? How
Active
do
listening.
actively listen to people in effective manner. So that's another very cool thing.
I think to be a little bit clearer about this, I guess I need to explain. I was trained in psychiatry. That's what my specialty was when I was in medical school. And then I actually went on to actually study a bit more psychotherapy. I will be honest, I had a lot of struggles dealing with the system. Partly because of my character traits. I'm not the most disciplined person under the planet, under the sky. So I've always had difficulty following the system. So what I've always done was always try to riff off what I've learned, research on my own, and that's how I came to where I am today.
Yeah, and I speak to Ethan all the time to get psychoanalyzed. So
yeah, this guy has troubles. Yep.
Yes. Okay, Marcus, how about you introduce yourself to the group?
Okay, I live in the UK. I'm a Gallup certified coach. I wish that was a major part of my business, but actually I do a fair amount of leadership and management training as well. But I'm trying to build up that part. I've used strengths for over 10 years now. That's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Marcus, pick the next person to go.
Okay, Xavier.
Okay, so my name is Xavier. Xavier, the way you prefer to say it, I don't care. I know it's difficult to pronounce for many English people.
What would you prefer?
Really, I've in my career I've been abroad, etc., and I've had it pronounced anyway, so I really don't care. and my adaptability helps me with that as well.
Yes.
So I'm a certified strength coach. I'm actually a, let's say, a business and executive coach, I would say. So I help entrepreneurs and business owners to live their entrepreneurial project with more serenity. So I'm the person who's there for them. You know, many business owners, they always feel alone and they don't have anybody to talk to, etc. So I like to do that. And basically, I'm working with them on two axes in general. First is to put down on paper their project. So basically, it's strategy, it's redefining who we are, where we're going, what we do, etc. So that it's really clear for everyone, for themselves, for their employees, etc. And then on the other side, we work on strengths, their strengths and their team strengths. So we have everybody's aligned on the objectives and everybody's working better together with strengths. So we've got a more easygoing company, let's say. So it's mainly small businesses. So basically from 5 to, at the moment, 5 to 15, 20. But I do collaborate with this Labo des Talents. It's a French lady certified strength coach, and she has some larger clients, Florence, and so I work with her for larger clients. So groups of 60, 80, 90 people.
Oh, that's large.
That's it.
Thanks. Xavier, pick the next person.
Well, I have to pick the only one I know. I will say Richard.
Thank you, Xavier.
I know Marcus, but he talked already, so.
Yes, and you mentioned Florence just a moment ago. Florence is wonderful. I've met Florence several times, and we're part of a big mastermind group. So yeah, she's a wonderful person to work with. So that's good that you're working with her on that. Yes, my name is Richard Sterry, and I'm based in the UK along with Marcus. And I did my Gallup certification in 2015, and my top 5 themes are individualization, learner, relator, maximizer, and harmony. And I must admit, my relator likes authenticity, and I'm not a fan of these virtual screens behind. So that's my real office, that's my real room behind me on that side of things. With that, and where I specialize is thank you, Xavier. I'm talking to coaches all over the world and providing tools to help them deliver their coaching practices and just to really save time and make things easier in that respect. So closely linked with Gallup, I'm one of the few Gallup licensed partners and so on. So I'm working with Gallup and working with coaches to hopefully provide useful tools and resources that are relevant to coaches. So that's me, really.
Very nice. Thanks, Richard. Pick the next person.
Yes, Cher, are you able to talk?
I am. Thank you. This is Cher. Sorry, I do not have on video this morning. I am based in Omaha, Nebraska. I got my Gallup certification earlier this year, prior to all things COVID related. I was actually doing an in-person session at the end of January and then finalized my certification the following month. I have currently been leveraging my certification in my company. I work for Cox Communications. I do coaching and leadership development and consulting. I am working to build up my own business on the side as well with coaching. My top 5 strengths are positivity, communication, woo, developer, and individualization.
Can definitely sense the positivity there. Yes. So
Yes.
much energy in your voice.
And the woo.
And the woo, yes, definitely.
Yes.
Thanks, Cher.
And
Please
I'm
carry.
not sure who. Yeah, I'm not sure who else needs to go, or who has already gone. That
You have 2 more to go. And I see that Nicole has turned on your video. Would you like to go next, Nicole?
Yeah. Oh, hi everyone. Yeah, actually I'm quite new to StrengthsFinder. Actually I got introduced to it by my friend. And I found it really quite interesting because it helped me to actually know a lot more about myself, about my strengths. And like I used to notice like certain things, but it's just that StrengthsFinder helped me to like, it helps me to actually see that, oh, actually I have these strengths. Yeah, but I actually took the test. I took the test last year. But I only managed to like unlock the top 5. So
Nice. Do you remember the top 5?
yes. So top one, the first one will be connectedness, followed by adaptability, then belief, responsibility, and then I think lastly relator.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like still a little bit new, still trying to figure it all out, and still trying to figure out how I can actually maximize those strengths, like in my workplace and even in my everyday life. Yeah.
So Nicole, thanks for joining us. Very warm welcome. My tongue is tight. So very warm welcome to the community. So take your time to get to know. Got a lot of strengths coaches here from all around the world. And
this is going to give you a very steep learning curve, which is great.
Just get your questions out. Someone will pick up, and we're all learning from one another. And as you join the future meetup sessions, we'll also find more opportunity to talk about your strengths and things like that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Nicole, pick the next person. We have Jeffeth or Jenny?
Jenny?
Hi, Jenny.
You can go next.
Hi there. I just joined. Oh, hang on. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just joined a minute ago. So am I supposed to be answering a question or just introducing myself?
Just introducing.
Okay. I am Jenny Radisi. I live outside of Chicago. I teach at NIU and Northern Illinois University. And my strengths are individualization, relator. And why can't I remember? I'm in order right now.
It's on your name.
Input, arranger, and individual. Yeah, and relator.
And
Learner.
It's called a morning. It's the morning brain. I get it.
Yeah, I haven't had any caffeine yet, which is why my camera's not on.
I'm going to pass the caffeine over to you digitally through the camera. You get it?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Delicious.
Love it. that leaves us with Jeffeth.
Come.
Okay, Jeffeth here. I work in a government agency, helping public sector leaders on leadership, policy, and governance. So top 5, I'm not a trained strength coach, but I've worked enough with Alex to know what StrengthsFinder is. He even got my virtual background set up for me. So my top 5, input, learner, intellection, connectedness, and responsibility. Right. So always in my head, right? So gathering information and such. Interested to learn, that's why I'm here. Intellection is really love any deep, insightful conversations with one another. Connectedness is probably my own way of liking of pulling things together, right? Everything happens for a reason. And responsibility is my primary way of getting things done. So every time when I commit to someone else that I'll get it done, I will get it done because that's just me executing it, right? So just a bit of background. Right? Thanks. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Jeffeth. So for Quick Connect Live, what we do is every session we pick a topic to talk about, and then as and when possible, we layer it with our talent teams and our strengths, and that generally comes out, right? So I pass the time to Ethan. We're going to talk about community today, right?
Yeah, community. I think this is a great discussion point. I come unprepared, unlike the last couple of rounds, which is going to help. Now, it's like, let's put it this way. I'm pretty sure Marcus is a community builder, judging by his strengths. But so I'm very passionate about this because so a little bit more background about me, mild autism. So I had to learn how to read people from the ground up. So I had no skills of reading people until I was 17. I literally had to learn co-reading, psychotherapy, all these different things. That's also one of the reasons why I was interested in psychiatry, right? So it was my way of trying to understand the world. So when we talk about community building, this is one of the things that is really interesting because if you look at the perspectives, like I was just describing before we went on, it can be weaponized, right? For example, Steve Jobs is well known to be quite an ass to his people, right? Like, love him or hate him, you know that he gets things done, but he built a community around it. But if you look at the culture within the community, what kind of culture is it? Is it that of inclusiveness? Is it that of exclusiveness? Right? So these are all the questions that keep on going back and forth about community building for me. Because especially when you're gathering different people with different strengths and different backgrounds and different beliefs, how do you allow the maximization of that rather than, singular mindset? Which means, like, for example, again, if you talk about the typical Apple fan, there is a stereotype around it because it attracts certain people with certain types of thinking versus, having diversity, right? What kind of communities encompass and embodies diversity? There are certain groups that actually do so. There are certain people who actually want to talk a lot about the diversity. So that's also where it really comes back into the equation. I think today what we wanted to talk about is also because Alex is in the middle of building a community. And we are also talking about this as community builders of our own, in our work, in whatever, companies we're working with, whatever clients we're working with, we are effectively building communities.
Right. So Ethan, I thought, why don't we use the chat a little bit and get everyone to type in some stuff, right? So If you were to type in a word or phrase that describes what the word community means to you, just take, 30 seconds and type it in and let's see what we get.
Yep, we have all adjusted to Richard's relations with people, authenticity.
Remove all our virtual backgrounds, it's not gone now. Friends. More thinking and executing power. Okay, that's
very interesting.
Okay. Hi, Jason. Welcome.
Xavier,
how y'all doing today?
With you at that point.
Good.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good. See you in outer space right now.
Yeah, we're talking about what makes describe like a phrase or a term or anything that describes community, right? What does community mean to you?
Okay.
In the chat box.
Yep.
In the chat box. Great. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So Jenny said friends. Richard said common interests. Xavier said more thinking, executing power. Cher said together and sharing ideas and resources. I wonder if you start comparing this to your talent teams, you probably see some linkages. Collective sharing of wisdom and insights. So Jeffrey is input, right? And learner. Jenny, team. Amplify everyone's strengths. This community. Nicole, community is about unity, embracing differences. Chaos.
I love community chaos. I'm a huge chaos theory person, so like it's one of the major things.
Interesting. Okay, now on a scale of 1 to 10, can everyone just put in the chat box, how important is community to you? Ten, 7, 9. Okay. 5. Jenny, you're a relator. How is community low for you? I don't get it.
No. So there's a difference between family and community for some people.
Okay. Hey, Jenny, can I just pick you and ask you a little bit?
Yeah,
more
would that be the case?
Sure.
Yeah. Why 5?
Sure. Well, I guess for my relator, I view that more like the handful of people that I'm very close with. Right. So they're important to me. I mean, I like to work in a team environment, but I'm pretty independent.
Right. So you like it, but it's not important Is that the distinction?
I like it. Maybe it should be a 6. I prefer it, but I can function either way.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Thanks.
I would certainly go along with that. I think, Jenny, with your relator, and I think we share a few other themes as well. My relator, I love having those relationships, but they need to be really close relationships. And so I'm happy for a community where I can really bond with the people in that community. Whereas if it's just a great big community for something else, which you can't make those close connections, then that's not so important to me.
This is awesome.
The quality of the relationship.
Yeah, that's it. The quality. Yeah.
Cool.
I also offer that. So as a non-native English speaker and having known and I've spent some time in the US and in the UK and in Asia, and I think the topic of community is different. Like I know that in the US there's a lot about the community that's more like you're almost the town or the culture or the block in which you live, or and so you have to give back to the community, and then so it's something very, very specific. Whereas here, for instance, Belgium, France, maybe the Latin countries, we use the word community, but it's more to describe like a little bit where you live, but not so much because the ties are different. And it's for me, my community is more the people with whom I'm in contact with, like professionally. So maybe I would say like LinkedIn and Facebook would be my communities, online communities. I do have, of course, offline communities, but so I think that the word community has to be defined at some point, because it could mean something very different for each of us.
Yeah, and I'm starting to realize that, because for me, community is like my group of close friends that I meet up with, that, you know, either close-knitted church friends or things like that. But I wouldn't see it like my entire neighborhood is my community kind of mindset. So I guess that's why the scale in terms of importance is quite different depending on how we define it, right? So if I defined it as my neighborhood, then yeah, it's probably a 5, just like Jenny. But if I define it as my close group of friends that I meet, that shares my dreams and my fears, that would be probably a 9 or 10 for me. Yeah.
And to kind of extend from that, right? So the interesting part about this is that, I mean, coming from Asia, right? So Jeffers, me, Alex, and Nicole all come from Chinese culture, Singaporean Chinese culture, I believe, right? Okay, so for us, community means oppression. You have to follow the rules of the Chinese people, right? So there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of that where we grew up with. Thankfully, if your parents are a little bit more modern, you're able to get out of it a little bit more. You're able to explore a bit more. If not, you have to eat eat at the time they want you to eat. You have to act the way they want you to act. You have to become a doctor, lawyer, financier, like the list goes on. And all these kind of expectations brought upon you. So that's I think it's great that Xavier brought this up. Xavier, I'm just going to stick with Xavier. Sorry. Because I want to go by your original, but you say you don't have preferences. So, but the individualization is kicking in for me. So one of the major parts about this is, I think it's very interesting because I would like to focus on the community that you lead or you create. And I think this is really relevant in the sense of, partly because as coaches or as entrepreneurs or as people doing different types of work, communities you lead are actually going to be resonant with who you are as a person. Like if you're participating in another person's group, very often in social identity theory, we have always talked about how a person turns into a different person to join that group, right? So for example, a person working at work would fit into the culture of that group. Whereas if you're actually doing your own business, doing your own freelance, doing your own coaching, very often you go into this thing where you are creating the relationships around you. And I think this is very, very important because being hyper aware of what we're creating is very important. And I can give you a reason why this matters for me. So yesterday, I just had a friend come by, told me, she used to work with me. We were doing as like a partnership. She was trying to join my company. There were certain struggles and there were other people who were working with me at the time who started working with her. And I did not know this was happening under my watch, what they were kind of bullying her and they were kind of oppressing her at the same time. But see, this all happened under my nose, where I did not observe what was happening. So part of my issues with my community building is I did not enforce certain expectations of people because I allowed too much chaos to happen. And that's literally what happened in my life, right? So community building is very interesting because it reflects a lot of where you are coming from and what you allow. And that's why this is very interesting, because again, I go back to the reason why I wanted to talk about it today is because Alex is building a community, is in the midst of building a community. Now you guys are part of this community for the time being, as we're having a discussion. But that's where it's also interesting, because as community leaders yourself, I see it as very interesting because it can be a form of extension of you. And this is where I think it's a very important thing. And I love what you just said, Marcus. So I think one of the interesting parts is that very often we need a de facto leader who maintains the community standards, or the moderators, or the people who set the standards, right? They are always the maintainers of the culture, right? So this is where it's interesting, right? How do you do it? How do you manage it yourself? What is it that matters to you most in the community that you build? Right, because there will always be a little bit of what you do into whatever communities you build, no matter whether is it professional or personal. And there's a little bit of you that will always be there. And that I think is an interesting conversation to have, especially with all of you guys with different experiences.
Could I just check, how many of you kind of leading or building a community, whether professionally or interest or whatever? Just raise your hand. Jason, Richard, and Marcus. Okay.
So not so much the rest of the guys. Okay, because that's an interesting point, because when I look at coaches, I look at them as community builders. I think there's an interesting difference that I'm seeing right now. It's a bit
different, Ethan. So if coaches bring their clients together in the form of community, then there's a group dynamics that grows and develops. But if they do one-on-one mainly, then there isn't that much of a community being built, because it's...
So that's interesting, right? So when you talk about your group of friends, do they intermingle? So very often even when Jenny was talking about community not really mattering as much, because it's about the relationships with the individuals that she has, but in the sense of your world is your community.
I like Xavier.
Yeah, I love what Xavier said.
They'll tell the coaches to build a community, i.e. a mailing list.
Yeah.
Do you see a mailing list as a community?
So I don't, but I've got a business in background. I've done 18 years in strategic marketing, and I've heard, I could see all these coaches for coaches, and I not really applied, but I followed some of their webinars, etc. And I hate these guys, but because they're not telling anything new. I mean, it's just basic stuff, but they always use these nice words again. You've got to build your community. So basically, you need to get people to follow you so that you can show them your shiny new project or product or whatever, and so that you can show it to so many people that even the few will purchase it, will bring you enough money. So that's another side of the word community. But Alex, I was wondering. So you said you're trying to build a community, and I guess it's a clients community. Is it?
No, not really.
Okay. Let me explain.
Okay. Yes, okay. Alex, share.
Yeah, let me share. So I'm going to share my entire strengths journey thing all over again, right? So many years ago, I walked into a bookstore and I saw the StrengthsFinder 2.0 book. And I thought, hey, this looks so cool, right? So I bought the book, did an assessment, found that the report was amazing. And then I bought the same book for a best friend. We did it together and also found it so accurate. We were both like, it's like the fireworks analogy, right? Oh, it's so you, it's so me. And then it goes to the drawer and we never touch it ever again, right? And that's what we do with most profiles. Fast forward, sometime later, our church was looking at building our lay leaders' capabilities, and then we decided, hey, we'll use StrengthsFinder. Then it's still called StrengthsFinder, and to develop all the leaders. So one of our bookstores closed down, right? It was called Borders. For those of you in Singapore, So Borders closed down, and we went there and bought all the StrengthsFinder 2.0 books at a discount. Resold it back to the leaders at cost so that we could all do it. We had a vice principal in our group, in our community, whom we happily assigned the role of teaching us how to develop our strengths from reading a book. So he tried that, he did that, we came up with different activities, we talked about it. But at the end of the session, he wasn't very comfortable with what he did, right? And conveniently at that time, Gallup started their really, really first accelerated coach certification in Omaha, right? So he flew over own cost, got certified, came back. The first thing he told all of us was, Alex, we are doing all wrong, we need to redo. So we did that. And shortly after, Gallup brought the certification to Singapore, and my friend said, hey, Alex, you love coaching, right? Go get certified. So I went, I got certified, and I discovered that, hey, this is so amazing. But think of the number of people who have gone through exactly what I did, right? We go through the profile, we look at it, we think it's so fun, so useful, and then we don't really have any physical impact with it, right? One of the groups of people that I really, really love working with are the youth, who don't have a lot of money, right? So one of the things I wanted to build was a community whereby people could come together, talk about their strengths, learn from one another, develop the talents, work with each other through problems, dreams, whatever, and support one another in that growth. So that was kind of the mindset that I had in terms of how to build this community that's strengths-based, that pushes a strengths movement, that isn't centered around commercials. Because when someone starts paying for stuff, and I mean, now I started a paid membership, right? So I'm slapping myself on the foot. But there needs to be some degree of commitment. That's why I started a paid membership. But the community was really built to help everyone grow. So a few stories come to mind, right? I had a youth come to me once. So this youth, I got to know him. He said he wanted to develop something in his life. Then I found out more about his family situation. Then we started to share and help him grow in that area. So he came to me and said, Alex, why do you do this meetup group for free? And I asked him this question, right? So if I charged, would you have come? He said, no. So the community was really built in a way to like, how can I draw more people to come in to know, so that different people can support each other, and we all bring our own different talent teams, right? So in my, not just talent teams, but our own talents and our strengths and our skills and our knowledge. So if you were to join the Strengths Finders Singapore Network, you realize that I've got emergenetics coaches. So Jeffers is one of them. I've got Enneagram coaches. I've got people who do EQ. That guy is going to do a talent showcase with us next coming Saturday, in fact, right? So we have different people all coming with different backgrounds, all with the purpose of helping one another. And it really makes me feel very happy when, with COVID and even in the past, when people start losing their jobs, someone just comes onto the chat group and says, hey, guys, my wife just lost the job, got retrenched due to COVID. And other people are posting like, oh, you can sign up for this job, can try this job. And it just comes through the chat group, right? And to me, that's kind of what community looks like, right? Where people, we may not know everyone at intimate level, some people intimately, but when someone has a problem, they can come to the group, people are willing to share, they're able to resource and help and support one another. And that's kind of where I see the community, what the strengths community is that I want to build.
So when we talk about, so that's why to launch off from his kind of story, right? We're not looking at a community that, you can sell to as the focus. The key part here is sharing the stuff. So actually, he has been doing this for what, 5 years? 6 years. And he's been doing it for free. He basically gets people to pay for the room. And so 10 people pay for the room so that we can all gather together and learn about strengths. And he just shares a little bit more so that people who want to take to the next level can go. And I think this is really the key, right? So he wanted an organic sharing community. And I think that's where I would then add the word organic into the thing, because you're not building it for pure monetary purposes. There is a lot of personal investment into the community's values. I think that's what the difference in which I would then refer to, because Xavier, you were perfectly right about defining it as, there are a lot of people who say that, you build a community to sell to, but the key part here that we're recognizing is that it's really about the sharing part and making it sustainable for him, as well as building it as a value-based system. or a talent team and a values or a strengths-based system to be able to really cover the topics. And this is why I think it's very interesting to talk about this, because especially from your marketing background and hearing about communities like this, it is a very different angle from that of people like Marcus, who you said a little bit that you in the chat that you do build communities in a non-professional setting as well, right? Can you share more about that as well?
You're still muted, Marcus.
In a professional setting, what for any kind of training I do, I always set up a WhatsApp group. And I keep them going even once the training is finished, and periodically people, and I post things on that for them to help them grow and develop. Some, because I've got Relator, some people and I bond particularly, and that might develop further, okay, where I might help them, okay, or vice versa, they may help me. In terms of, from a non-professional point of view, I'm involved with 2 or 3 kind of community groups where I do offer my services gratis, help people in terms of take the strength, they don't have to pay for it. And I give them a one-to-one session, and I help them, usually people who are kind of young people really, aged probably 18 to kind of 25, or somebody might send somebody to me, you know, who's a student, you know, and I'll do it willingly, because I have belief as, I think my number 9 strength. I believe that if you're in a position to help other people, you have a moral obligation to do so. So that my belief, you know, kind of feeds it to some degree, and it links in with, you know, some of my values.
Very cool. And if you don't mind, I'm also going to ask then Richard, because you also build communities in Jason, right? So I'm going to ask Richard first.
The couple of communities I'm involved with, one is with coaches, where I'm talking to coaches literally all over the world about different things. And what I'm doing with that is that with my individualization and connectedness, I'm finding that there are coaches who are perhaps coaching in very specific niche areas in different countries, and I'm connecting them together and introducing them to each other in that sense. So there might be a couple of coaches who specialize, say, in helping people find the right career and sort of work with it, find the right job and that sort of role. And there might be one in the UK, there might be one in the US, and if my individualization senses that they'll get on well together, then I will make that connection, that introduction with them, and just sort of help them with that side of things. It's very much, there's the introduction, I will then step back and let them carry on that conversation from that. And sometimes there's been opportunities where they've really thrived and they've really benefited from each other in that sense. Another community I'm involved with is a group of 15 coaches. We've been together for about 4 years now, and we meet on Zoom every month, and we have a very active Yammer group and sharing lots of information and things between us, and very, very supportive. And it's a very, very close group, and the trust level in the group is incredibly high. And we call it our Global Strengths Mastermind group on that. And
is that where Florence is on?
It is. Florence is on there, yes. And it's really helped me. So when I went over to Omaha to the Gallup Summit a couple of years ago, I was literally traveling from the UK on my own and had never actually met anybody in person who was going to be there. But we all arranged to stay in the same hotel at the main conference. One person reserved a table. We all sat at the same table. It was like my coaching family. And it made such a difference being at that big event, but having that small family who I knew well being there. So those are just a couple of examples of what I'm involved with.
That's really beautiful to hear. Thank you for sharing. I forgot to say that, Marcus, you are a gem. Thank you for sharing all your expertise with the young folks. Yep. Jason, can you share a bit more about your community building experiences?
Sure. I have a few that I can talk about. First, previous life, before I was in coaching, I was in residential education at a university. And so I lived in for a few years, but then I was responsible for building community in residence halls. And so I pull a lot from some theory there. And it's from one, the basic concept is from 1 to 100 and 100 to 1. And so one person starts building the community to the group of community people. And then the goal is to shift it so that the community is doing all of the work. And the one person is just there to say, oh, what about this? Or have you thought about that? It's really that empowerment that, what's the word I'm looking for? It's about just helping them and supporting them. So initially, I did a lot of work to start the community. Ideally, I was just there to make sure that they didn't do anything to like blow up the university.
Did that happen?
By the end? No, fortunately not, no. But there were a lot of smart, like really, really smart kids that are probably too smart for their own good. And so that's the first community that I would reference. And then I've actually taken what I've learned there, and I'm doing some consulting with a rural co-working space, and we are like to build community within that. And so I'm taking what I've learned in an environment where you have lots of people who, like, so taking from college, you have lots of people who have different aspirations, doing different things, and they are all stuck in one place. Sounds generally like a co-working space to me. And so I've been able to take that and apply that in a different way. And it's neat to see that coming to fruition. The co-working space is actually expanding significantly, and growing that community is a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Okay, so Ethan, I was thinking of getting everybody to type in the chat box again. I'm hearing a couple of things, and I also want to invite those who don't see yourself as community builders to join in as well. So what I'd like you to do is to type in the chat box, what are some things that you do or try to create to, create that community that's healthy and strong for you. So for example, in Richard, I heard things like, we meet every week, so there's
every month.
So there's
regularity. Yeah.
And then you talk about, this is trust levels very high. So, there's all these elements that goes into building a community. So I would like to hear from all those who are community builders. What do you do, or what do you create in your community so that you can build it? And for those who those who participate in communities, could you also type in the chat box, what do you look out for in the community that will make you stay in one? Yeah. Because that'll be useful for us to know, right? We try to build community, we may not know what people are looking out for. So we can just take a minute or so and just type it in and see.
Very cool.
That's support. Yeah, my favorite word is support. Ethan, you see, support.
I know. Dude, I specialize in support too.
Open communication.
Expectations.
Support. See, support again. We are with like-minded people.
Very cool. Yeah, you are attracting quite like-minded people.
Open communication, expectations, acceptance, yes. Safe environment, support from the community, celebrate individuals' wins. I like that, Jenny. Beautiful. Transparency.
Oh, Marcus, yeah, that sounds interesting. 3 times a year. Wow. Okay. You're muted again.
Okay, with one particular group, which I did in 2008, we still meet up, they were from different teams in one organization, and they've all left that organization, but the bond seemed to be so strong. Out of the 12, 6 still meet 2 or 3 times a year, and we, talk about where we are, what our challenges are, and offer each other advice of what to do.
Very cool.
It's like an action learning set, really.
Yeah. No, actually, so that's a Alex just say yes, yeah.
Yeah, I just heard action learning, so my eyes went. Do you do action learning, Marcus?
Well, I've created a couple of action learning sets that I've worked with in the past, but in recent years, not so much.
Right, interesting.
Okay. The reason I lit up is because Jeffers and myself, we are both action learning coaches, and you know that
Okay.
word is kind of like a buzzword for us. Right?
Okay, I didn't know there was such a thing as an action learning coach. So.
No, I think that there's different Alex. Action learning sets are not the action learning in which we do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a buzzword for me. I hear action learning, I go like.
So as you guys can tell, right? I don't have a degree. I don't even have any certification. Meanwhile, this guy next to me is just right. We're in the same community, right? So that's also the kind of diversity that also is worth talking about. I think what I love, what everybody was talking about, like, so it goes back to space of vulnerability, support, ability to inspire one another. There's a lot of this. There's constantly this safety element, transparency. There's constantly the communication. I like that topic on that part, because actually, Xavier, as a person who came from strategic marketing and building communities, and in that area, right, building communities, as a person who's looking for like what we're talking about on the other side, which is organic, authentic communities, which is what we are really referring to right now. What's your view on building that and having that? You're still muted, sorry. Xavier, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Good question. Tough question. Because I was reflecting that I'm not really a community builder, but I'm a community, how would I say that, promoter. Because community is actually part of my values.
Oh.
So I need to be part of community. So you asked at the beginning, who is building communities? So I did not answer because I'm not building communities. But I am part of, like, I don't know how many communities. So I love that. Even in the strength world, I mean, we have that Labo de Talent that Florence has started. We are 5. I'm having regular calls with German-speaking coaches. I'm in a call also with some British coaches, and I think that the key, and it will be the key for both a community that you create for marketing purposes or another community that you build out of shared interest. One thing that I see in common is you need really, I don't know how you call it, frequent contact points. So I know that, and it's probably the same as Richard's mastermind. If it wasn't every month on a set date, it would just fizzle. It would disappear. And in every one of those groups I'm part of, they are like every 3rd Tuesday of the month, every whatever. So I think that's really a key component. Otherwise, you lose track. But of course, you need that shared interest, which you will have in both as well. A difference between a marketing one and another one will be that if you create the marketing community, you will be the sole provider of information, the sole facilitator, administrator, whatever, call it what you want, community manager. So you will have to
constantly
engage,
encourage or engage.
You will be the only one trying to get people to move. When you have one created more for shared interests purposes, you usually have somebody taking kind of the lead, but you have everybody then chiming in and saying, oh, why, what do we do, etc. So that's a major difference, I think, for me.
Thank you for the clarity. That's amazing. That's great. Thank you.
I missed it. So Xavier, you mentioned that you are a community promoter. That's the term you use, right?
So every time I'm let's yeah, good example. The week I spent in London for my accelerated strength course back in 2017. We were 31 people. I mean, those of you who went through it, you know how it is. It creates a real bond between those people. That week is really creating a bond between the people, and I felt that it should somehow go further. So on the last day, I proposed to everybody, guys, we need to keep in contact, but we have people from the US, from East Europe, from all over. And so I proposed to create a Slack team. So to use Slack so it's a bit like WhatsApp or whatever. Anyway, it was the easiest at the time to use. It's a bit like Yammer.
Right.
And so I created that space, and then I invited everybody to join. I did a coaching training last year, and very in a few days, I proposed that we create a WhatsApp group to keep in contact. So every time I'm in a group like this, I will kind of find a way to get the people to have at least a means to keep in contact. And I think that part of it comes from my input, I think, because I know that I will need a mean to share interesting information with all those people. So it's a bit how do you say that?
Self-serving, I guess.
Self-serving, yeah. But I also see the benefits for the others. So I'm not necessarily the one who will really create it and animate it, but I will at least propose the idea, and then usually somebody else will take hands and take the lead.
Very cool. I just want to use this as a launch of like another discussion point that I thought was very interesting. So I just want to go back to my strengths, because then I could just list it out, right? Like, so
inauthentic. No, sorry.
Inauthentic? What?
Yeah,
okay.
No longer have an authentic background, my
Yeah,
friend.
okay, it's all right. I just use it for a while, right? So I think one of the interesting parts of my experience was, so I used to run a lot of student groups. I've always been the leader of the community, whether or not I wanted to. I will always be arrowed as the person, or because nobody else does anything, because we're in Asia and everybody's kind of like, I don't want to be arrowed. I will always end up doing the things. So I end up taking leadership roles, and I actually function a lot like Xavier in communities. Usually what happens is somebody starts it, I come in, I kind of carry it, right? So that happens very often for me. So that's kind of what I do in a lot of the groups that I do. And what was the most interesting point was actually a juxtaposition of what happened in the past. So this bunch of stuff like ideation, always coming up with new ideas, strategic, I'm always looking at the big picture, right? I'm always learning new things, and I'm always sharing. Individualization, I always be different with each person. And the self-assurance, which is the interesting part that comes in next, because it's also the one that got me into trouble. So now I just want to share a bit more. So I used to run a student group. There's an NUS jazz band. So I work as a jazz musician as well, and a Cuban musician. And what happens, I was running a student group. And when I was running it, like, people hated the crap out of me. Why? Because I was making everybody listen to the music. But mind you, in the NUS jazz band, in the university jazz band, nobody listened to jazz. Can you create a jazz band from a non-jazz listening bunch of people? No, you can't, right? So I was literally forcing people to sit down, go through the music with them, and then getting them to think about it. I was always looking at the big picture, and I was a little bit too self-assured, which is, the usual story that most people used to tell me when I was younger. And what happened was that I rubbed a lot of wrong nerves. What happened was we created the best concert we've ever had till today. And so much so that there was a second concert that it continued even without me. So I left right after. And what was really interesting is that right after that, it was like on a high, right? We were like making all the successes and everything. The next president, or the next person who took the lead role, started a barbecue night for every single rehearsal we had. Within half a year, the band virtually disappeared. So there's the regularity element. But here comes the interesting part. As much as I was the common enemy, I pushed people, right? People came down. People made sure they appeared. Things were not nice, right? People didn't like me telling them what to learn, how to learn, but I forced them to. So I got hated as hell, right? Like soon after that, I had a really bad time dealing with those people afterwards. But the thing here was, most interesting part was we got the results we wanted. We got to a new place in terms of the music, in terms of the band. And they were taking pride in that, right? So they were enjoying the glows of that. But the person who carried them through was me. But when somebody came in and focused on the bonding itself, everything crumbled. So that was a very interesting thing. We should talk about community. And I think this is really interesting because when we talk about this, there's always kind of a goal, a shared interest. Yes, people say that they came in together to play music. That's a shared interest, right? But if you look at it, yeah, without expectations, that's very true. That's very interesting. So that's actually a very, very true thing. So as much as we have, so that's why I wrote down the bond creation, bond maintenance, shared ownership and community leadership. The transparency, openness, and mutual support were very important parts that was missing because there was nobody pushing towards a certain goal for them to even be conflicting. There were no conflicts. There were no conflicts whatsoever. Everybody was fine and dandy, but the community crumbled. Now that's a very powerful story for me, like just looking back at this. Hi, Mr. Copper.
I have no idea.
I don't think he's in the right group.
No idea. So that was good entertainment. He had a very interesting image too. So the thing that came to mind, Ethan, when you were sharing was this, right? So if community existed for community's sake, I mean just so that we could get together and barbecue, it probably won't last very long. But a community rallied behind a mission or movement or an objective is probably one that will continue because there's a direction and focus that everyone's moving towards. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So it seems like it doesn't matter whether there's an enemy, whether you're not nice to one. I mean, per se, let's look at Apple, right? For example, people is well known to be a very political company, but people are still striving to be in there, and people are proud to be people from Apple. So as this topic goes on, I mean, look, there's the other end of the spectrum. So I heard this about Dan Lok. So Dan Lok is a famous marketer who claims himself to be a wealth guru. And so I've been following this guy called CoffeeZilla who kind of opens up what happens in there. And what's really interesting is, what really was interesting is that he makes people chant his name every single night. They'll have a chant and a phrase they have to chant every single night and log it in and send it into a group. That's a form of community enforcement. And so this is really interesting. So I love it that we're talking about hope, trust, compassion, stability. Is that from Jeffers? Could I ask you more about where the question came from?
Strength-based leadership.
Strength-based leadership, right? So very cool. So when we go back to this, and so hope, trust, compassion, stability, it requires somebody to hold it. Does it need to be, or can it be something that's shared within the community? That's also a question that I would love to ask. Jeffers, want to talk about it?
Your question is like, can somebody hold it, is it?
Yeah, does one person need to hold all four in that sense, or can it be a group of people? This is also an interesting question because I'm always asking these questions because I don't really understand this that well, as much as Alex has shared before with me. And I just want to kind of just get this going as a concept. But Jason has answered it on the chat.
So yes and no. I think that yes, one person can be responsible for all of it. If you want that community to exist after that person is gone, then the answer is no. So you have to spread the wealth in order for the community to be successful.
Very cool.
And interesting, right? Because when Gallup did the strengths-based leadership, this was a study of what made people want to follow a leader. And they found that if a leader, through their talent teams, is able to provide these four elements in whatever form, right? So for me, empathy, individualization, developer, strategic, and learner will be used to how do I create hope with my top 5 talent teams or the rest of my talent teams and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how we can start to build I would say that it's more about building followership than it is about building community. If I look at how Gallup created it, I think there's a little bit of difference for me. So we can create followership, right? That's what followers are looking for in leaders, to have hope, trust, compassion, stability. And I think that when it's talking about the sustainability of a group, then it comes back down to the norms of the group, right? Where things like, are we safe? Is that authenticity? Is it safe? And I think these are norms which might fit into these 4 elements, might not fit very well. I've not really gone deep into it. What do you think?
I don't know. I see it from a slightly different lens. Like, so I see it in the form of like motivation, right? So it's like, let's say I join a group because either the topic like give me certain hope. Hey, this is an interesting topic. There's certain hope that I'm personally invested in this topic. I think that's the shared interest part. There's also the other bit about reducing my own fears around if I face, for example, I like to join health and wellness group because I personally sometimes also feel anxious about things. So I joined that as a part of my own motivation because I want to reduce my own anxiousness around things. So I don't know whether there's one thing about having hopes and fears. So I resonate with the point of the hope, trust, compassion, and stability because I felt the last 3 components about having trust, compassion, and stability sort of fits into making you less insecure, reducing your fears around being a group or talking about being in that community per se. But if I feel safe and like, let's say I don't have a lot of fears even within that group, naturally I would want to stay first in that group also because of the topic, right? Because that topic helped me is of a topic in which it reduces my fears and anxiety. So naturally, this topic I have more motivated to sort of be in this group.
I think it's very cool that you're saying that because actually now I'm looking at this, right? So hope is related back to the purpose, right? Like the shared vision, the shared purpose, like because hope is what you want to learn as well, right? Like from what I'm hearing from you, hope for a better thing, a mission or a purpose in mind, right? When we talk about trust and compassion, I really realized that the transparency elements, the support elements, that willingness to reach out to support one another and share knowledge is really key. The stability part I'm looking at, is it from the regularity or is it from, like, if we just look at the 4 needs without a leader in place and we just look at it as purely a concept around these 4 things, how does it activate within a group as shared values or shared behaviors or norms?
I don't know, maybe can expand a bit more about what that stability means first, because I just, maybe from Xavier, what does that stability means from the needs?
Yeah, for the strengths coaches, if you guys want to share.
Yeah.
Stability in the sense, so in the sense of strengths-based leadership, stability is how, so if you are a leader and you want people to follow you, you have to make sure that they understand that they're in for the long term and that you will bring them some stability. If you follow me, I'm going to make kind of the future a bit more secure, or I don't know, stable, whatever. So that's how I read it.
A little bit more,
a bit more certain. That's the word I was.
A more certain future. Interesting. That's cool. Anybody else? Any thoughts? I think what's really interesting is that I suddenly had a realization. So imagine if the leader is the vision itself, or the purpose itself, or what people imagine themselves to be after being part of the community. So when I put this as a slightly bit of difference, right? So if a leader is the one that encompasses all 4, and he manages to imbue other people to have this 4, eventually you have your micro leaders, you have your sub leaders who actually become individual leaders on the sort. So the vision itself has included that growing these people is part of the goals of this community. I think that's what I'm hearing from all the communities that people love the most so far, right? All the communities that you guys have described has been communities that make you feel inspired, that make you feel like you can learn and grow with, that has created impact on the ground, that you feel safe with, And then, hope for stability is really about the fact that there is the element of being able to help other people see a better future, in a more certain future, from what I'm hearing.
And I think the other thing about building communities that can grow, expand, is that the people that you're developing and building are actually leaders, right? So it's not about building a group of followers, it's about building a group of leaders who then can then develop and grow and groom the next generation, so to speak, right? And therefore start to grow the community and therefore have a even bigger impact on whatever that purpose is that we want, right? So in terms of strengths movement, it's about helping people to understand, accept, name, claim, and aim their talent teams in themselves so that they have more confidence, they are more productive, they have better engagement, better well-being, greater efficiency, better relationships, and things like that, right? So with that in mind, if we start to build people the next layer and next layer, we can then have a ripple effect across, hesitate to use the word community, across the community of our communities, right? So
but I love it because like we go back to the front of this conversation, right? Xavier was saying community means more thinking and executing power. Cheryl was talking about together and sharing ideas and resources. Jeff was talking about collective sharing of wisdom and thoughts. Jenny was talking about team. Jason was amplify everyone's strength. Let me look for Richard. One, it's common interest. Here comes the interesting part, right? Because I mean, I find it interesting because as I'm looking at all this, does a community need to be defined? It doesn't have to be, right? That's the interesting part of a community. It's very often a loose group and a loose concept. And that's a fascinating thing because I think communities exist before people named the community, clearly, and whether we find it useful. I think here comes the part, right? Like it's where everybody gets to gain something from the community, whether it can be learnings, it can be a new goal, it can be all these kind of different things that they gain from it. Like before we start talking about the rest, Marcus.
So why do some communities cease to exist? I'm involved in a particular community, and the chance of it kind of continuing, kind of diminishing because we're failing to attract younger people to hand the baton on to. Okay. So sometimes they have to change the purpose to match the context within which we live in.
That's
interesting. That's actually, can you tell me more about that community that is starting to have difficulty? Like it's like
okay, so there's a community that was formed 62 years ago. Okay.
Wow.
And it's been going. It has about 500 members on its database. However, there are probably only about 20 active members, and quite a few of them are now kind of in their late 70s. Okay. However, because of what it is, the younger generation, the millenniums, they're not interested. So it will die out. It was started by people who migrated, who came to England as part of the Windrush generation. Okay, and then you have other kind of professional groups who are formed out of those, and again, that community and the support is gradually waning because although their purpose still has some leverage, it hasn't moved with the times. The context in which we live in terms of social media, in terms of, well, if I join this community, what's in it for me? Yeah, and those sort of things. So for kind of business speak, the value proposition doesn't speak to particular generations.
Richard, you want to say?
Yes, you mentioned a valid point about moving with the times and things. And something we touched on right at the beginning of this conversation was whether a community is inclusive or exclusive. And it's finding ways for it to be inclusive, to include that greater audience. And you talk about the Windrush generation, and I'm thinking of a similar analogy, and I'm not a cricketer at all, but with the cricket, certainly in the UK, it was losing its popularity and very small audiences, and it was finding it very difficult. So what they did, they then shortened the matches to have very short, quick, fast-paced cricket matches, which became more entertaining and grew in a greater audience. And so that was the way how they adapted to then be more inclusive to gain that wider audience. So I don't know if there's a similar sort of thing you can do with your group, Marcus, that might help to bring in those people on the fringe or those people just outside the group.
Yeah, I think you're right, because there's a saying about the people who survive are the ones who can adapt. Somewhere there's a saying in there. I think you're right. It's about, trying to get the group to adapt, but then some people just want to hold on to what they have. They don't want to shift, and that brings some of the tensions you talk about in terms of the politics in community groups that Ethan is talking about.
Yes. And actually, if I would just extend this a little bit more, right? So the politics happens very often because people don't want to recognize reality, right? The group is losing out, there's very little things that's happening. It's like, no, we were right all along. Do you care about being right or what works, right? So that's the other part of this equation, right? Do you care about what's right or do you care about what works? So these are a lot of things that comes along this. I think what a wonderful thing that I really learned from all of you guys and this conversation was actually a very interesting point here where, so when you guys talk a lot about community building and everything, it's always about, the growth you can have, the safety you can have. And we talked a lot about each people's experience on their different journeys, right? Like the ones that are strongest are people who share and actively give. And there's the other part, which actually, if anybody read Adam Grant's Give and Take. Yeah, so Jason, you've read it. You know what I'm going to talk about. The number one rule of maintaining a community is to remove the takers. Actually, right? That's one of the most important parts. That's really important. Any takers, meaning people who like to hold power and refuse, therefore make it exclusive, will always kill the group. Meaning they're more interested in being right. They're more interested in conscious business. Adam Grant, right? So it's a wonderful book. Another book called Conscious Business that I'm right now on has taught me a lot about some of these other elements about knowers versus learners. So and if you look at it, knowers and learners are basically givers and takers, right? Same kind of mentality, same kind of mindset. And we're talking about growth mindset. Let me write that in. Conscious Business by Fred Kaufman.
But it's there's also something that was proved back a while. In any community, you always have it's the rule of the 1990. You always have 1% of people who are really active.
Yes.
9% of people who are active from time to time if they get triggered by something. And then you have always 90% who are only lurkers. So they will always only be there watching, never coming into play and exchanging, etc. And that has been, and I did a paper back when I was in the university about communities of practice, and that was true for communities of practice. I could see that at the time it was the big days of internet forums. It was the same in forums, and you can see it today in Facebook groups or whatever. And that has always been the case.
Yeah, that's also really interesting. So now now we are going to the technical analysis of communities. But I think what we were focusing on was really like I love it. I love that we're reaching there, but clearly we have no time to do that. But because if not, we'll never end. But the wonderful thing here is that like we talked about what community means to us, how we want to lead it, right? And we talked a lot about the elements, and we talked about the strengths, leadership elements, and I think it's even about ability to pass the baton down to next other people, And I go back to the bond creation, bond sustaining, like be able to maintain the bond, as well as the shared ownership and community leadership, the transparency, openness, and mutual support that leads to overall empowerment, right? So we go back to the four most important things, which is hope, trust, compassion, and stability, right? So these four things all lead back to, if you look at it, right, if every person feels like they can gain all four of those traits as leaders within the community as well, it's also what's going to engage people. Of course, there's probably going to only be 1% of your community people, judging by what Xavier was just talking about as well. And a lot of these elements, actually, it's very interesting because when we talk about this, when Xavier was talking about that community level, a lot of it is the large scale communities, but for a lot of us, it's personal communities within our lives. And those are probably the 1% of the people we'll meet versus the 90% or the 9% of, so if you look at your personal life community, right? 90% will be lurkers, people who just hi bye. You have 9% of people who are friends, decent, you can hang out, nothing much more. And then there's the 1% of people who you can count on, like in that same breath, right? Like if you look at that as well. So when you're talking about building a community, you're almost talking about gathering those 1% of people that you want to be around into the same space. Would that be the case?
I think if I look at, I've got a group of friends. We're friends since we were back in high school, and we're about 9, 10. So I can totally see that you have some who are really active, always reaching out to others, etc. And you have those who are more like laid back and participating when something's organized, but they won't propose anything firsthand. So I think it's true in every setting.
Yeah, very cool. And I think, yeah, and again, it's true. But like, for example, Marcus' story, right? 6 out of 12 people stuck by, for the many years. The community. So yes, I agree with you. And at the same time, there's also a selection bias very often, depending on where you are, because then you can attract the 1% people back into the space, which would be an interesting discussion to have. But clearly, we're not going to have that. But it's an interesting concept to think about, because if your community is looking for that 1% of people that will be active and will be giving, having those as your close knit, while other people stay on the side. So I mean, I'm also looking this also on the business grounds, where especially a business, your old mom and pop shop, right? Where your mom and pop shop that used to run groceries and convenience, what happens is that 1% are your regular customers, 9% are your one-off customers, and 90% are probably just the random people who drop by, right? Who will never come back again. And so we go back to all this kind of mindsets where that's also where the relationships really count, and how do we want to maintain those kind of relationships within the community you're building. And that's also the interesting portion about this. And if you're going to be super exclusive, are you keeping out the rest of the people because you're also shrinking your overall audience size? That's also another question that pops up as we're talking about this. However, because we are also running out of time, so I would like to kind of wrap up a little bit more, and I would just like to hand it back to Alex.
Yeah. Hey, Ethan, there was a question by Jenny. I'm not sure we covered. So,
oh, sorry, I didn't see.
Asking, does a community need to be defined as a community, and then transactional community? So we're talking about community being able to perpetuate itself, right? Jenny, that was the context of the question.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about what Marcus was saying, that his community is starting to die, to die off, right? This one organization, and I'm wondering if the purpose of the community is no longer needed. Is that such a bad thing? That's why I was thinking of transactional, right? In a short-term community. I was thinking about my students. I teach marketing. I teach introduction to sales, and the students, about half the students there, it's a required class, so they hate it. They don't want to be there. They're afraid of sales. They think it's awful, and I kind of build a community in my class. I make sure that they feel safe. Those things that we were talking about with the strength-based leadership. And then afterwards, the next semester, I often get many of them to coach and mentor, the new ones.
Mm.
So, but it's more of a transactional community rather than a continuous community. I don't know. But then again, my community was a 5, so it's just something I was thinking about.
Actually, that's an interesting point, Jenny, because if we rally communities around a purpose, then there are certain purposes that are more, well, transactional in nature, right? For a short period of time, after which you have met that purpose and the reason for existing kind of ceases, right? That's what, yeah. And I think that's entirely possible, right?
So I think for high touch communities, like meeting every day, for example, being an organization, I heard this thing about there's a season for everything, right? Like you might be part of this community for a long while and then you move on, right? So that's also a very interesting thing about the transactional, or I mean, Jason was thinking, is it transactional as well? I mean, it kind of both kind of works in this scenario, right? Transactional is like it's for a purpose only, and then transitional is because it's really temporal, right? And then I think Cher asked a really interesting question about for his community, if it's still really needed. Would you be clear about the purpose and everything?
Yeah, maybe I add something. So
Yeah, Jeff.
I share from the point of view because I'm doing some like training programs on leadership, right? So some of these programs, where we first started out, they are sort of like a short community, was for the purpose of sharing in their own, sharing of their leadership challenges and things in this whole workshop, which lasts about 3 to 4 weeks. But many a times we saw how the relationship evolves after the workshop, because this group of people are sort of managers of the same rank, right? So the challenges in which they face is going to be similar as they grow throughout their journeys as leaders. Whether is it they suddenly came in as managers, then later on they advance as directors. So I don't know how to put that. Maybe that's like initially it was transactional and the purpose sort of changed and they decided to keep that same community and the same group moving forward. And more or less this sort of lasted on for, I must say, a couple of years for people to connect, because I mean they're working with one another, right, in the same space. So they share their own struggles as leaders. They seek each other, like, hey, if I got performance management issues, how should I approach my staff? How can I bring myself to give my staff a bad grade, right? And they could share such resources. And I don't know, at least this is what I saw in the space in which I'm working. And I just find it fascinating how some of these initially that was transactional, I mean, maybe they call it transactional from a training workshop, sort of evolved into a deeper relationship that lasted for a much longer period. Yeah.
And you get some organizations who give their staff a day or 2 days a year in which they do community work, like picking up litter or creating a garden or building or something. So and sometimes through that the relationship builds and there's some continuity. So I really like that comment, transitional or transaction, by Jason. That's kind of really helped.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. So I want to make sure that we didn't miss out anyone's questions. I remember I saw Jenny, so I thought I'd bring that up. So thanks. We are about 5 minutes in, and I thought we had an awesome conversation. And that's the nature of the Quick Connect live session, right? We kind of have the topic. We don't really know where we're going, but as we start to talk about it, it kind of blooms and we get all these interesting things. So I'm wondering, let's close by doing this. Let's go back to the chat box and write, what is your biggest takeaway from today's conversation with regards to community and whatnot? And we'll just very quickly run through and we'll close the session for today. Okay.
Pick someone.
Yes. Are we going to type in the chat box, or are you going to share one by one?
Let's just type first. Sorry.
Yeah. Biggest takeaway. Everyone just go like, oh, I've got so much information in my head right now, I can't think. Give and take, must have a clear purpose. Different types of definition and community, including the transitional, transactional, whether it's a close knit or the wider community, right? Such broad definitions. Encouraging sharing and participation in the community.
Yeah, Alex, while folks are typing, I ran across there was a quote that was coming to me and I couldn't think of it, but it's around friendships. It's friendships for the reason, for a season, or for life, and talks about that's an Aristotle reference. And I was thinking, our community is the same way.
Interesting. Communities for a reason, for a season, or for life. I just replaced the word. It's very interesting.
That's actually a beautiful way of looking at it, because at the same time, it doesn't make you feel like you need to hold on to your community, which is something that I see people doing. You know, like, I cannot lose my followership, you know, my likes on my Facebook, right? Or Instagram, right? So yes, I completely understand what you mean, like, as you put it into that perspective.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah. I was just thinking of, so I'm a learner, right? So I attend many workshops and many trainings. We have a Facebook group for every workshop that we have, or WhatsApp group for everything that we have. They are alive for the next 1 month with everybody. Oh, I'm doing this. This is interesting. Da, da. And 3 months down the road, silence. 1 year down the road, people are dropping off the group. So yeah, it's just like, should we? Is it a pity that, you know, the groups are dying? I do feel a little bit that way, but then yeah.
So one of my biggest learnings before, actually talking about the once a month meeting versus once a week meeting versus whatever, one of the interesting things I started learning is that there's this word. So I was learning membership systems, right? So I've been learning about building communities. I can't really agree with a lot of how these guys teach, but it's very useful information. Like, you know, like Xavier actually listening to the coaches, training coaches, how to get their clients kind of thing. So I was interested in learning this kind of stuff. I realized that there's one big reason why people don't retain. They call it overwhelm.
Too much information.
Too much information, too much things to do, choice paralysis. And this is the general audience. I mean, of course, a person like you would absolutely love it.
It was very interesting because I was going through this book called Tiny Habits. I think it was one of the award-winning books, I think, at the moment. So it's sort of, the person highlights this thing called a formula. It's called behaviors equals to motivations and plus ability and plus prompts. They say motivations comes from your hopes and fears, right? That is generally how we motivate. Ability is how easy can a person do the task, and prompts is how frequent it pops up in front of you as a prompt. And it says that most of the time when we want to influence people, we tend to use the motivation, right? Like, okay, it's a shared interest, right? Raise the same hope, we have the same common interest, common topic, or we talk about certain fears, and we sort of come together and push people to take certain action. But then again, they say, the author says that it is the most unreliable because it requires on certain will. So I sort of recall this thing because of what Ethan mentioned, not because of the motivation, but on the ability part, where when the perceived things to do is like there's so many things to read, immediately it won't get me to take that behavior. If it's just maybe like read an article or read one couple of lines, is easy, right? Just to take an action. But that ability also builds over time, at least that's my sense, and I'm still thinking about how ownership comes in from here. But that's what came to me. I'll post the Tiny Habits. Yeah, that's what Alex has posted.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
prompts is probably that frequency, right? You prompt enough times, and sometimes people don't respond is because they are not aware of it. That there's a group.
Or some people are over prompted.
Oh yeah.
That's the other part, right? Where we're always bombarded.
Now I'm worried about how much information and how many meetups I need to run for my meetup group now.
No, so that's the, we can take it offline from this and we can have a talk about this. But I think Xavier would be definitely a good person to talk to about this, judging from his love for different communities.
Xavier, I'm going to reach out to you. So, thanks everyone for joining us. And I think for Marcus, his other takeaway is this whole list of books to read. What's the name of the book? What's the author? What's the name of the book? What's the order? So it's like 3-4 different books that you can start reading from Marcus. I was very amused. Okay, so thanks everyone. I think we've come to the end of our 1.5 hours together. Thanks for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And at any point of time, if you want to, you can actually go. We've used the chat group a little bit more this time around. So I think if you wanted to, you could actually download the chat if you want to save it. Like by clicking on the 3 dots, and I think there's a save chat function you could probably use. So if you'd like to save the information that we typed in collectively, please save the chat so that you keep it with you. And I look forward to seeing all of you joining us for the next session in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you,
one
Marcus. Thank you, Xavier.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We do have a talent showcase coming up this Saturday. So we have another strengths coach and also a EQI coach that's going to take us through. It's at 2 p.m. Singapore time. So I'm not sure how that works out for some of you in terms of time zone. But if you like to, yes. So if you are able to and you like to join us, you could go to the Strengths Finder Singapore network and you can register for it. It is a paid event or free for elite members. So remember to talk about, I need to make it sustainable. But if you're keen, do come and join. You know, Ethan, I've never done this before, right? This is the first time.
Yeah, no, it's a great job. Great marketing compared to before.
Come and join us if you like to. I think it will be a very fantastic session because we're going to talk about EQ and IQ and personality.
Yeah, do you have a link for the call this Saturday? Cher is already asking. So you need to personally reach out.
Yep, I have it. Can I just share the link to the meetup group, and then everyone can find all the information there?
Yeah, this kind of things is better to do one-on-one personal touch, but okay.
Yeah, just worried that sometimes once we drop off, we don't have each other's contacts.
Yeah.
So if you need to reach me, you can reach me through the link there and join the meetup group. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you in either this Saturday or in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.